Hello again. Welcome everybody to another Facebook Live session today on IELTS Writing, the general training module, Task 1. Today is the 17th of October, 2 p.m. London time, and what we're going to be focusing on today is how to write informal letters. So welcome to all of you who have just joined me. Now, if you have any questions related to IELTS Writing Task 1, please make sure that you leave them in the comments box section, and I'll be more than happy to write any specific answers to specific questions that you have about the IELTS Writing Task. Okay, and also make sure that you have a pen and paper handy for writing all that important information down in your notebooks to take away with you for your learning for today's lesson. Okay, so let's get started. What we're going to be focusing on today is hopefully by the end of this lesson you'll be able to understand the importance of tone when you write a friendly letter. Now, quite often a lot of people are very confident in writing formal letters, but not when it comes to writing friendly letters. So in my experience of having checked a lot of IELTS writing exercises, a lot of candidates tend to show a lot of difficulty in this area. So make sure that we understand the sort of tone that you need to have when you write an informal letter. And hopefully also by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to carefully select the sort of words and expressions that you need to use when you write a letter to a friend, a family member, or someone that you have a close relationship with, perhaps a best friend or your wife or your spouse or your children, and so on. Also, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to understand how to edit your own work, as well as to check or measure your writing against the IELTS standard criteria, particularly in General Training Task 1. Okay, so let's first of all begin with the sort of problems that writers tend to have in IELTS Writing General Training module. Now, people tend to focus too much attention on the essay, particularly because they feel that the Task 2 writing carries more weighting, and therefore it's worth concentrating more on Task 2 than Task 1. Now, this is understandable, and that's fine, but the sort of you also need to make sure that you focus some attention as well to on Task 1, because it is part of your overall assessment. It forms part of your overall assessment score. So if you concentrate too much on Task 2 without giving sufficient attention to Task 1, then you'd only be harming yourself, and you'll probably see the results in your overall writing score, not understanding why is it that you've got a low band score in your writing tasks, when you should be getting a high score after all that training in Task 2 and in essay writing and all that. Unfortunately, as you may well know, your test report form does not give you information or does not give you a breakdown of the areas where you have been performing badly, or the strengths of your writing. So you're going to have, if you're not receiving any feedback or help from an IELTS trained tutor or an examiner, you will probably end up guessing that it's Task 2 that's weighing you down, which may not be the case. Okay, so even though Task 2 carries a bit more weighting than Task 1, you still need to give due importance to Task 1 as well, because at the end of the day, it forms, as I've mentioned many times before, your overall assessment score. So do not underestimate the importance of letter writing. The second problem is that a lot of candidates tend to unknowingly apply all that they've learned, the vocabulary, the expressions that they've learned from task 2 and onto task 1. And this should not be the case, because when it comes to writing letters, particularly informal letters, you need a certain different style of writing. Yeah, so there are some words that are more appropriate for writing essays or writing formal letters, but are not really appropriate for writing a letter to your mother or to your best friend or to your sister, and so on. Yeah, so what you may have learned, the vocabulary and expressions that you may have learned in task 2 may not always be applicable to the context in task 1. So it's not like a t-shirt where one size fits all. Language comes with a lot of exposure to what feels right and what doesn't feel right in certain situations. So from what I've seen, a lot of candidates have shown more difficulty in writing friendly letters than writing formal letters, like letters of complaint, letters of application, letters of requests. So whenever, if you're given a task where you're asked to write a friendly letter, what are you going to do? You can't jolly well use the same expressions that you've got in writing a letter to a bank manager in the same way as you would write a letter to your mom. Yeah, so you have to be absolutely careful. You have to be really, really careful as to how you're going to word your intentions or your meanings in task 1 informal writing. Okay, so that needs some attention. So you cannot use the same style in formal writing and apply it to friendly letters. Now, the third problem area is not giving sufficient information. Now, this comes back to planning. Also in formal writing as well, in letters to shops or companies or to airlines, quite often people tend to be very, very general in their detail and not giving specific information, or not developing their bullet points well enough for the reader to be able to take certain action or steps to fulfill the third bullet point. So, for example, if in a formal request where you've lost your luggage at an airport, for example, and you're writing a letter to the airline or an airport manager requesting that you send the lost luggage to your residence, if you haven't provided an address or an email address or a telephone number for them to contact you on, how would you expect the manager to send that lost luggage? So sometimes you need to make sure that you have provided sufficient information. Try to put yourself in the shoes of the reader. If you receive that letter, how are you going to react? Are you going to read the letter to the end and try to help the person who wrote this letter, or are you just going to crumple it up and toss it in the bin? You've got a choice. So you've got to help your reader. Try to make your letter sound as though you are actually writing to an airport manager, or a letter to your best friend who is at hospital, for instance. Try to make it as believable and detailed as possible so that your letter sounds convincing. So this is where a lot of people tend to lose marks in task achievement, because their letter is not developed enough. And instead of writing, I'm staying at Hotel Kensington, number 47, Green Lane, blah, blah, blah. People end up writing Hotel ABC, address 123 Smith Street, and so on. That doesn't show much imagination, and it doesn't make the letter sound believable as well. So make some sort of effort in the planning section to jot down all those details, all those all that information that you need to convince your reader that this is actually where you live, this is actually your real phone number, not 01234567. Yeah, you might not lose any marks over it, but still, it doesn't harm you in trying to make your letter sound as convincing as possible. It shows a certain effort on your part to make the letter sound believable, and perhaps this will lead to some sort of development in your writing. Okay. The fourth point is not apportioning your time correctly. So a lot of people, they think that they've got 20 minutes to write their letter, and therefore they, once they receive their task, they pick up the pencil and put pencil to paper immediately without actually analyzing the task properly or planning out their details. Okay, so do make sure that you apportion your time correctly. Now, if you've already been, if you are currently my student or have already been taking lessons with me, you would know, or you would have practiced intensively, that you need to make sure that you have 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes of analyzing the paper, not necessarily 5 minutes, but maximum 3 minutes perhaps, and then actually 10 minutes to write your letter itself, and then 5 minutes at the end to check. So you would have already gone through this practice with me, and so you would be familiar with apportioning your time. But if you are not familiar with dividing your time on your own, when you do your self-practice, make sure that you have that you divide your time accurately. Maybe 5 minutes to looking or analyzing the task that you have to do, 10 minutes of actual writing, and then 5 minutes of going through your work to see if you've made any mistakes, which leads me to the last problem, not checking your work. So I may have mentioned this in other lessons, but I cannot count the number of times I have had to award reduced band scores because candidates did not check their work for spelling, punctuation, structure, complexity, links, as well as addressing the task properly. So do not underestimate also the importance of checking your work. Okay, and this is extremely important. Managing your time efficiently is part of doing well in the IELTS test. So please do check your work at the end of your writing. Okay, so how do we get over these barriers? First of all, make sure that you have a lot of practice on writing friendly letters. Now, it's a good idea to try to have a good cross-section of the sort of tasks that you do for practice. Okay, so even if you are good at analyzing the sort of tasks that Cambridge has been giving out to candidates, I think most recently there have been a lot more formal letters than informal letters, but still, you may not know that perhaps in the next writing test you'll be given a friendly letter rather than an informal letter. So what are you going to do then? If you have been religiously practicing formal letters over and over again, if you're given an informal letter which you haven't had enough practice on, what are you going to do then? So make sure that you have a good cross-section of practice when you do your writing tasks. Not only should you be doing letters to, of complaints, of requests, of applications and so on, make sure that you also have friendly letters that involve, giving news, of changing jobs, of moving location, and so on and so forth. So have a look back at past Cambridge papers and see what you can use to give yourself enough practice on. Okay. Now, the second strategy is understanding that formal writing is not informal writing. Okay, formal writing is formal writing, that's it. You cannot assume that you could use all those wonderful complex expressions that you've learned in essays and in formal letters and apply it to informal writing. It doesn't work that way. It is a matter of understanding what sounds right, what feels right. So if you haven't had enough exposure to the way people write friendly letters, I think you might be at a disadvantage here. So if you are already familiar with writing, with knowing how to write letters to bank managers, restaurant managers, airport managers, or whatever, that's fine, but also get yourself familiarized with how to write proper letters, proper friendly letters to people who are close to you. Make sure that you don't go over the top and use too much slang in your writing to the point that your examiner doesn't understand what you're talking about. But at the same time, make sure that you maintain some sort of a certain level of politeness and respect, but still maintaining a friendly tone to whoever you're writing to. Okay? Now, the third thing that you have to pay attention to is planning your details. Make sure that you plan this down to the very specific. So if you have to write a letter to a former teacher, for example, asking them to be your referee in a job application, make sure that you, at your planning stage, give this teacher a name. Okay, don't just, you can say Dear Mr. Smith or Dear Mr. Adam or whatever. Details like, mentioning which school, which class you were in with this teacher, at what year, specifics, as in what subject your teacher used to teach you, at which level, and so on and so forth. So don't just gloss over the information or just write the very general or just give vague information about about your relationship with your former teacher. Don't say, Dear Mr. Smith, I was your student at primary school and I would like to ask if you could be my referee. Now that doesn't help the reader very much, because the reader or your former teacher might think, who is this student? I've taught thousands of students in my teaching career. I don't know who this is. I don't know which class this person is from. I don't know at which level. I don't know which subject I taught him at that year. I've taught a number of different subjects, but I don't know what he's talking about. So help your reader along. Be specific when you write a letter. Okay, so this goes to how you plan your writing. Now, number 4 is using the 5-10-5 method, which means apportioning your time properly. And this is something that you can easily overcome. 5-10-5 meaning 5 minutes of planning, 10 minutes of actual writing, and 5 minutes of checking your work. So, managing your time is something that a lot of candidates can easily overcome. You just make sure that you set some time during your day to practice time management when it comes to writing out your test. Okay, so when it comes to the real test, 10 minutes seem quite easy for you as compared to someone or the candidate next to you who haven't had much practice in managing your time. So instead of falling into the trap of panicking when the invigilator tells you that you have 1 minute left, you would feel confident in knowing that you've covered all bases in your writing, that you have managed your time properly, and that you're able to confidently submit your paper when time is up. Okay, so do allocate your time efficiently when you practice on your own. And finally, always, always, always check your work. Okay, I think a lot of people who are quite disorganized tend to, I wouldn't say have their paper snatched away by the invigilator, but somehow clinging on to their paper, to writing the last words on their paper before time is up. You should always leave some time at the end to check your work. One word of caution, please make sure that you meet the word count. Now, even though you have been told that you are supposed to write 150 words in your letter, 150 words is not the length that you should be targeting for. 150 words is the length that would ensure that you will not lose any marks. Okay, it doesn't necessarily entitle you to get a band 9. Okay, so just to be on the safe side, make sure that you write a length of 170 to 180 words. Don't go beyond that. Don't go past 200 words, because you'll only be wasting time. You won't get extra marks by writing a lot more words than you're supposed to. 170 to 180 words would probably be safe enough for you to cover all bases, to make sure that your writing is developed enough, that all your bullet points are addressed, and that to make sure that even if you have accidentally copied some of the expressions from the task question, you will not lose any marks because of it being under length. Okay, so yeah, always check your work to make sure that you have met the word count, you have structured your bullet points properly, you have got all the details there for the person to take some sort of action at the end of reading your letter, and making sure that the style of your writing is appropriate, not too formal, because I think that's the most common problem that candidates tend to have, that their writing comes out as sounding awkwardly formal instead of friendly. So you might lose marks in task achievement over this. Okay, so you don't want, even though your grammar may be perfect, you've got all these lovely, beautiful, complex sentences, not one grammar mistake, but because your writing sounded so formal, it would come off as sounding very awkward, when writing a letter to your parents, for example, or to your grandparents. So I think make sure that you maintain the right tone when you write a friendly message. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at an example question taken from a past Cambridge IELTS paper, test 11, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so here is an example task. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task. Okay, let's take a look at what this task involves. You've recently received a letter from a friend asking for advice about whether to go to college or to try to get a job. Now, you think he or she should get a job. Okay, so this is your opinion. Now, you have to write a letter to this friend, so obviously you know that this should be a friendly letter. So you need to adjust the tone of your letter to suit the sort of relationship you have with this friend. Okay, but at the same time, I think I've mentioned before, try not to be overly friendly to the point that you come across as sounding really rude and obnoxious. Okay, so say why your friend would not enjoy going to college. Explain why getting a job is a good idea for this friend, and for you to suggest the types of job that would be suitable for them. Okay, so write at least 150 words. Okay, not a maximum, at least 150 words. But if you follow my advice, you should target for 170 to 180 words, so that your letter appears developed enough and to ensure that you do not lose any marks should you accidentally copy expressions from the task wholesale. Okay, so you should begin your letter as follows. Dear somebody. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at an example answer. And, the band descriptor for IELTS Writing Task 1. This is the public version. I'm not allowed to show you the secret version that examiners use. But this public version should more or less help you to understand what you need to cover, at band 9. Now, what I'm about to show you is a sample answer at band 7. Okay. Excuse me. Now we're going to try to compare the quality of writing against the examiner criteria or the assessment criteria, as you can see here in the band descriptor. So you can see that the writing has got these legends here. Blue indicates task achievement, yellow and green coherence and cohesion, orange lexical resource, and pink grammar range and accuracy. Okay, so let's take a look at this example band 7 answer and find out why this is a band 7 and not a band 8 or 9. Okay, so how did they begin? Dear Haruka, hello Haruka. Okay, now that's something that you need to pay attention to. We don't really give double salutations when you write a letter. Okay, so do not repeat your salutation. I'm writing a reply to your letter that asking for advice about whether to go to college or try to get a job. I think trying to get a job is better for you. I would like to write reasons why. Okay, this beginning part here sounds rather abrupt. There's some linkers missing. Okay, but the good thing is that this letter gets to the point that there is a purpose stated at the beginning of the letter, that this person is giving their opinion about what they think the reader should do. Okay, so the purpose is clearly stated, although I think the introduction could be, I think, much better. I think one of the things that you could try and do when you have to write a friendly letter is to, ask for news or give news. I think that would be a polite thing to do, rather than, hello Haruka, I'm writing to tell you what I think about this, which could sound quite rude. It doesn't sound friendly at all. A friendly letter should show some concern about the other person. How are you? I'm so sorry to hear that your mother has been ill. How is she now? Things like that. Exchanges, asking for news and giving news. But don't make it too long. I think one or two sentences should be. I think one sentence should be enough to cover it, and then the next sentence should be on something that covers the purpose of your writing. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the next paragraph here. At first, I will mention about disadvantage of going to college. Now, this to me sounds more like an attempt at writing an IELTS Task 2 essay. First of all, there's a problem with the linker here. We don't say at first if you're writing a list. If you're going to list your points, you don't say at first, because at first usually refers to some sort of event. For example, at first I did not believe the news, but then later I saw that it was real, something like that. So you use at first when you're relating a story or talking about an event or an event. Another example would be at first he thought she was joking, but later he realized that she was serious. So that's an appropriate usage of the phrase at first. So I think what the writer is trying to say is, firstly, I will mention. Okay, now the tone here is not quite up to standard because you're not writing an essay, you're writing a friendly letter. So I think the writer could do without the first sentence here. I think you wouldn't enjoy it. Okay, now in a friendly letter, it would be more appropriate for you to use contractions rather than I think you would not enjoy it. It sounds more natural to use this in the contracted form. I think you wouldn't enjoy it because in college, especially a Japanese college, you could only meet people who are around the same age as you. Okay? All right, that's the first reason. You must have already met such a people in your junior high school and high school. Okay, and then in addition to it, again, this sounds a little bit like an essay, but then it's used incorrectly. In addition to this, rather, but this expression shouldn't be used at all, I think. Maybe something more informal, like besides. Apart from that, many students tend to just have fun with friends besides study. The reason why this happens, it is usually very difficult to enter Japanese colleges, but to graduate it is not so difficult. Okay, that's another point that the writer is trying to make about why they think college is not a good idea. For that reason, many students tend to just enjoy, like having parties, going out, going travel. Okay. However, college costs a huge of money on you. The fee of it is not cheap, of course. I think it is waste of money to go to college. Okay, let's talk about the criteria here. Obviously, the writer has met the criterion of achieving the task. The first bullet point, as you can see in the blue highlight here, is being addressed about why the reader would not enjoy going to college, and then he or she has stated a few reasons why not. So in terms of task achievement, I think they've done quite well. Excuse me. Now, in terms of coherence and cohesion, you can see from the green and the yellow highlights there, a lot of the time these are used incorrectly. Okay, what could have been better used in formal writing or in essays, they're being used here in a friendly letter. So this letter comes across as being too stiff or too formal for it to be a friendly piece of communication. And I think with referencing, this student has done quite well. Such a people, the reason why this happened, but there are a few problems, like the fee of it. We don't say the fee of it. That sounds a bit strange. In addition to it. Okay, so yeah, I think the discourse markers or the linkers is somehow awkward. There is some attempt at using referencing, like what I've mentioned to you, like the words it, such a people, and so on, but they can be inaccurate. Let's take a look at the third paragraph. Next, I would tell you why getting a job is a good idea for you. Okay, again, it sounds like the student is listing mechanically, okay, rather than communicating in a friendly way. The most valuable point is experience. Not like college, you can see many people from different age of you. By talking with them, you can get many knowledge of life, and it would be good for you. Not only from people, you can also get important experience from working. You could know how different to earn the money, and also you can know many social system as well. Okay, now, again, the task achievement, the second bullet point is being addressed, why getting a job is a good idea. Now, what is unnecessary here is repeating the purpose of each bullet point. You can see here in the first line of the second paragraph, at first I will mention about disadvantage of going to college, and then next I will tell you why getting a job is a good idea for you. What this candidate is trying to do is repeating the purpose of each bullet point. Okay, possibly to the dangerously repeating some of the expressions here from the task. So there's no need for you to repeat the points in the bullet. Yeah, just get to the point. Just get to it. As I will show you in the next on the next part of the lesson, where you will see an example answer, which is an improvement from the one that we're looking at right now. Okay, so there's no need for you to remind the reader, or to not remind the reader, but to repeat the bullet points in your paragraph. You can see that the writer is doing the same thing. Lastly, I would like to suggest the types of job that would be suitable for you. Again, suggest types of jobs that would be suitable for. It's almost to the point of copying from the task. So this letter runs the risk of losing marks for copying words from the task wholesale. So that would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 words copied. So if you have written exactly 150 words and you've copied 10 words and maybe more, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 20, about 30, let's say 30. 30 words have been copied from the test, from the task, and placed onto your letter like this. So if you have written exactly 150 words, your examiner will discount 30 words from your writing, and they will count it word for word, because that's what they've been paid to do. Okay, so do not copy the words in the bullet point. Your reader or your examiner will understand the purpose of each paragraph if you make that purpose clear without copying the words from the task. Okay? Now, coherence and cohesion. The most valuable point. Okay, that's all right. Next is not used appropriately. Also is good as well. I mean, there are some examples of good use of discourse markers or cohesive devices, but like I said, with a few errors there. And then we have the third bullet point, which is the writer having to suggest the sort of jobs that would be suitable for them, as you can see from the first sentence in the last paragraph. I think you're good at talking with people, so the reception of company, school, or hotel would be good. You can meet not only colleagues, but also many people of customers. If you would get a job of hotel, you can use your English skill as well. Okay, so the third bullet point is addressed. So task achievement, I think in terms of addressing the bullet points, I think is good, quite strong, but task achievement wouldn't be at a very high level for the reason that there are a few words that have been copied from the task at the same time with the tone of the writing, which sounds more formal than informal. Again, lastly, the use of linkers. Lastly, in conclusion, is almost copied from an IELTS Writing Task 2 essay. So try not to use words like firstly, next, lastly, in conclusion. Okay, like I've mentioned, you are not writing an essay. You are communicating with your friend, and I don't think when you talk to your friend you say in conclusion. Yeah, that sounds a bit strange. So be very careful with that. Now let's take a look at lexical resource here. Now you can see the lexical resources have been highlighted in orange. Okay, so you can see that the range shows some accuracy, some understanding of usage of complex words like disadvantage, around same age as you, just have fun with friends, very difficult to enter Japanese colleges. Words like graduate, huge, not cheap, waste of money, reception, colleague or college, customers, English skill. You know, basically the reader can follow what the writer is trying to say here. The vocabulary is not a huge impediment to understanding the whole task. I think, you know, it's quite easy to follow the meaning of what the writer is trying to say. But I think the weakest part of this writing has got to do with grammar range and accuracy. So you can see that it's you know, there are a lot of accuracy problems here. I'm writing a reply to your letter that asking for advice. Spelling here, I think, have enjoy, just to have enjoy, a huge of money, college costs, a huge of money, going travel instead of traveling, from different age of you, many knowledge, how different to earn, I think you good, many people of customers, you if you would get, I should try to get, I should, not you should. So I think this is the weak, you know, it has a potential of going up further, but grammar control is quite weak. So this is probably what's keeping the candidate from getting a higher score. Grammar control, as well as the use of linkers and the tone of the writing. Okay, so I think these three areas are worth looking at if you have adopted this sort of style of writing. Okay, what I'm going to show you here is an alternative example of the same question, of the same answer, and I'd like you to understand the register or the style or the tone of the writing as compared to this one. Now, it may be a bit too long, which is you know, in the real test is a little bit unrealistic to do, but my point is for you to understand the sort of language to use, the sort of tone you need to adopt, and as well as making sure that you do not copy words from the question. Okay, so let's take a look at how this is done. Dear Haruka, I'm so sorry for not having written back sooner, but here are my thoughts on whether you should continue with your studies or start working. Personally, I feel that you should try to find a job at this point in your life. Okay, so here states the purpose of the letter. The purpose is to give your opinion as to what the reader should do. Okay, because as you can see from the first bullet point, you have to say, from the question here, you think he or she should get a job. So the purpose of the letter is clearly stated at the beginning. All right. And then we have the next paragraph. That is a combination of the second and the third bullet point. So if you take a look back at the question here, say why, a combination of the first and second bullet points. Say why he or she would not enjoy going to college, and explain why getting a job is a good idea for him or her. So it's a combination of the two. Yeah, this is just one approach. You don't have to follow the same approach. You can follow the the approach of one bullet point per paragraph. That's fine too. As long as the bullet points are covered, I think you're on safe ground. Okay, just a minute. I'm just trying to recharge my computer here. Hold on. Okay, now where were we? Right. So the first and second bullet points are combined together like this. Let me just get rid of... Okay. Yeah, over here to here. I think going to college would be a waste of your time and money. And then I move on to stating the reason. For one thing, you'd get to meet more interesting people of various ages and backgrounds at work. Secondly, your older peers could teach you more about life than any of your college professors ever could. You'll learn more practical skills from working instead of sitting in a boring lecture hall and burying yourself in books. And most importantly, you could start saving money for your future with the money that you earn instead of wasting it on a degree that may or may not get you a job after you graduate. Okay, so here the writer has combined the reasons why they would not enjoy being at college and also stating why getting a job would be a better option. Okay, so the first and the second bullet points addressed. Okay, and as you can see, the linking words are slightly different. For one thing, secondly, and most importantly, and you can also see the use of contractions. You'd get to meet. You'll learn more. Okay, rather than using the full form of words. I think it's more natural to try to use contractions when you communicate in a friendly letter. And you can see that, it sounds as though I'm talking to you rather than writing an essay. I think going to college would be a waste of your time and money. For one thing, you'd get to meet more interesting people of various ages and backgrounds at work. So this is something that, people would use when they talk to each other in a friendly conversation, between friends. If you compare that with the one here, at first I will mention about disadvantage of going to college. Now, if you have a discussion of this over a cup of coffee, if your friend talks like this to you, you might think that there's something wrong with them, okay? Because people don't normally communicate like this in a friendly situation. So try to read your letter aloud. Well, not aloud in the exam hall, but under your breath. Loud enough for your brain to hear, but not for other people to hear. So you can mutter it under your breath to get a feel for the tone of your language. Would you actually use this sort of expression when you talk to your friend over a cup of coffee? Okay, so put yourself in that situation. And then, try to read it aloud. Secondly, your older peers could teach you more about life than any of your college professors ever could. You learn more practical skills, and blah, 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 and so on. So there is the tone here sounds a little bit friendly, but not rude. Yeah, so you need to maintain a sort of balance. And then we've got the third bullet point here is let's take a look back at the question, to suggest the types of job that would be suitable for him or her. Now, let's take a look at what's written here. So my advice is to try to find work as soon as you can. Based on what I know of the trending job market, I think you should look for IT positions that are available now. Haven't you mentioned that you wanted to specialize in this area? You can start at entry level and then work your way up on the corporate ladder and learn a few things along the way. You see? So here we've got a suggestion. Try to find a job. What kind of job? Job in the IT market. And then here is a sort of an informal reminder to the reader. Didn't you mention before that you wanted to specialize in the IT field? So here, there's a sort of connection between the writer and the reader. Okay, so it helps to remind your reader of this relationship, that you are friends, that you've had this conversation before, and you're bringing it up again now. And then you close by saying, let me know what your decision is, and I wish you all the best. Give my love to your mum for me. Take care, so on. Right? So you can see that it closes with a friend, with a friendly gesture, giving wishes to your mother, and so on. Okay, I think if you count this, it's about 250 words, but you get the idea. Okay, you shouldn't be using linking words that are more appropriate for essay writing. You can see that I still use some linking words like so, based on what I know. What else? Like I've mentioned before, for one thing, secondly, personally, and so on and so forth. So you can see that there are a lot of examples of complex structures as well. Bullet points are appropriately addressed, and the tone is just right. Okay, so hopefully that should give you an idea of what you should be working towards when you have to write a friendly letter. Do not apply expressions that you've learned from formal writing, particularly in essays, to informal writing. It doesn't work that way. I think if you want more information on writing friendly letters or how to write informal letters, have a look at my blog here, edublogs.org. And if you click on the little menu icon here, it will show you a sidebar that has a link to IELTS General Writing Task 1. So there should be some posts regarding how to write friendly letters, and maybe some links to exercises on other websites as to the sort of expressions you should be using in writing Task 1 friendly letters. Okay. At the same time, if you feel that you need to listen to some more advice about how to go about doing the test, have a listen to the podcast, which I have on iTunes. Okay, so if you have an Android or an iPhone, you should be able to locate me under the IELTS Tutor podcast. It's called The Strategy to IELTS Success. Let me just type that out for you. Okay, I'm working towards giving some important examiner tips and advice as to what candidates are currently doing wrong and what they should be doing to break that barrier of getting stuck at the same score again and again. Because as an examiner, I've seen the same mistakes being repeated over and over again. So hopefully, if you're not able to have the time to read the blog, have a listen to the podcast as well. It's always a good idea to read, because reading opens the doors to a lot many things. Knowing how to apply grammar to sentences, knowing the tone of the writer to the reader, and so on and so forth. So even if you don't have the time to read the blog, please make sure that you do, because it is a very important skill to have. Okay, so have a look at the blog, and sometimes I accompany my posts with an episode of a podcast that I have. And at the same time, I also do have an Instagram account where I list some problem expressions that I've seen in candidates' writing or speaking tasks. Some examples here that I've written: moreover, funny, at last, thanks God, and so on and so forth. So have a look at the IELTS Tutor Instagram account, because I try to post as much information as I can so that I don't get to see all of these ugly expressions used inappropriately in an interview as well as in IELTS writing. So it is worth your while to have a look at what mistakes you've been making and to avoid repeating them in future. Okay? And if you feel that you still need a bit more help with your writing or reading preparation or your speaking or listening, have a look at my website, which is the IELTStutor.com. And if you click on the courses tab, you should be able to find a list of lesson descriptions or course descriptions, as well as the various different rates that I offer to IELTS candidates when it comes to preparing for their test. Okay, so thank you very much for watching today's lesson, and I hope you have found the information on today's lesson very useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment box and I will be more than happy to address them. Okay, so you have a good rest of the week ahead, and I look forward to next Tuesday when I get to talk to you again. Okay, take care. Have a good week. Bye-bye for now.